Welcome to all the parents and carers to this training video on restrictive eating. My name is Alta Crockett and I'm an occupational therapist with a feeding service in Wandsworth. You'll meet my colleagues Jessica, our dietitian, and Millie, our psychologist as well. Let's think about our aim for today's feeding session. First of all, it's important to consider that feeding difficulties are complex and can be a slow process. It requires time and dedication in order to see improvement. And our main aim for our service is to empower you as the parent or carer to feel equipped to tackle the feeding challenges you are faced with. And we hope that by implementing these strategies that we'll be sharing, you will see positive improvement. Now, really important to mention here, it's really, really important to take the information that we'll be sharing and using it day by day. You know, think about that well-known saying, if nothing changes, then nothing will change. So it's important to make small changes gradually. Don't want to make it too overwhelming for the child and yourself. And through small changes, we hope that you will see some small change in your child's eating or behavior at mealtime. And over time, you'll be able to see the bigger change if you look back at the starting point. We'll be looking at 3 different sections today. So first of all, what are feeding difficulties and how common are they? Why do they happen? And how can we reduce these difficulties? We'll also be looking at your confidence today to be supporting your child. So first of all, please take a moment, get some paper, get a pen, and think about how confident you feel in supporting your child's feeding needs. So of course, 0 is not confident at all, but 2 or 3 is okay, and 5 is very confident. So I'll give you a moment to note that down, and we'll repeat this at the end again.
Hello, my name is Jessica and I'm one of the dietitians in the Wandsworth feeding team. And today I'll be speaking to you a little bit more about what feeding problems are. So we know that feeding problems are a number of things. It can be a diet that is very limited in the variety or specific nutrient groups. We may also see difficulties in developing feeding skills, or perhaps a lot of distress and difficult behavior around particular foods or meal times in general. We may also see insufficient intake that can be having an effect on the growth of our children, or we could also see a very limited volume of food, so just eating very small amounts. And of course, a big part of this is aversion to foods with certain tastes, textures, or smells. On the slide, we can see a number of different bubbles. So these are some of the things that you might be seeing in your child. So gagging is something that is very common, particularly with foods that aren't preferred or safe foods. You may feel that your child seems scared of the new food, or perhaps they're particularly sensitive to the smell of food, or when other people are eating food, or when you're cooking. They may not tolerate changes in the routine very well, or they just do not accept any new foods. You might see them cry and push food away, or perhaps they only want to eat if they are fed by you. We might see them not wanting to touch food or having a lot of difficulty staying seated at the table, just wanting to get up, get away. As mentioned, we can see foods that are very limited to particular texture, color, or even a certain brand of food. We may also see children overstuffing their mouth, so putting lots of food in their mouth at one go, or the opposite, only eating very small volumes of food. You may be thinking to yourself, is this just my child? And this is a question that we get asked frequently. We know that about 62% of parents with toddlers report some sort of feeding concern. And then between 13 and 80% of children with a developmental disorder have feeding difficulties. And we know that a high percentage, 89% of children diagnosed with ASD or autism spectrum disorder have fussy, picky, or what we like to call the term restrictive eating. So it is really important to say, just because your child is a restrictive eater doesn't necessarily mean that they have ASD, but we know that with those children who have a diagnosis, eating is often a common difficulty for those children. If we then think about the impact this has on you as parents or caregivers, we know it has a really big impact. There's lots of worries to do with feeding and eating. You may be worrying about your child's growth, about the nutrition of their diet, perhaps other people's not understanding your child's needs when it comes to eating, or about their social access. So what happens when they start nursery, when they start school, when you need to go to a restaurant or a family occasion? How are they going to cope? And this can be really stressful. Practically, then having to prepare several different meals, either several meals for the child or several meals for the family if everyone is eating different things in the house. We also know that feeding takes a lot of time and energy. Parents often say to us, it just feels like a constant battle, and they feel desperate. They just don't know how to change things. So if this is you, if this is how you're feeling today, hopefully by the end of today's session, through understanding a little bit more and by learning strategies that we have to share with you, you will feel like you are more equipped to tackle this challenge. It is then really important to think about the growth of our children. So you can see here is a slide from your red book, and what we would hope to see for children is them growing along their centile, so a nice even curve along their growth centiles. However, if you are worried about your child perhaps losing weight or not gaining weight for 6 months or more, or perhaps the opposite, you see that actually they've shot up, they've gained a lot of weight really fast, then this is something that we'd really encourage you to highlight to us in the screening form. So as part of the packs that were sent to you, there is a screening form included. It's one page where we ask you a number of questions. So if there are any concerns about growth, please do highlight it on this page, and we'll be able to get in touch with you to offer you some more support. Aside from growth, something that is very important is to ensure that children are meeting their micronutrient requirements, because they do need multivitamins and nutrients to support their growth, their energy levels, and even their appetite and eating. So we do want children to be having multivitamins. This can often be a bit of a challenge because we know that the kiddies that we see are very particular in what flavors and tastes and textures they will accept. So it is really important to look for a multivitamin that includes iron, unless your child is already on an iron supplement from the GP. So below are some different options that you can get on the market. There are some liquid options, chewables, and something that works really well, it's the second from the right, is the Vitamix and Sprinkles. If you've tried all the other vitamins and you're just feeling really stuck, this is a nice one because it is a colorless, flavorless powder that can be easily added to anything liquid, or even a yogurt or something like that. And it can be spread out in little bits throughout the day. So I'd really encourage you, if your child isn't already on a multivitamin, to try and see which ones you can get them to accept. What we're going to do now is take some time to complete a short activity. So you will see this plate in front of you, the Eat Well plate. This can be found in handout number 2. Again, these handouts all would have been emailed to you when you RSVP'd. If for any reason you haven't received these emails, please just type your email in the chat box and one of our team members will get these sent over to you. So We're going to spend about 5 minutes writing down all the different foods that your child eats. And it is really important for us to be very specific. So we would count toast and bread as 2 different foods. The same way we would count chicken nuggets and chicken dippers as 2 different foods. Yes, they're chicken, but in your child's mind, they're different because the shape is different, the color is different, the texture is different. So we want to include these separately. So you'll see in the green section, that is where we're thinking about fruits and vegetables. The yellow section is carbohydrates, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes. The blue section is milk and dairy products. The purple section is more your higher sugar, higher fat foods, biscuits, chocolates, cakes, crisps. And then the red, pink section is your proteins. So meat, chicken, eggs, fish, beans, lentils, tofu. So we'll give you some time to finish this, and then we'll explain to you why this can be very helpful.
Now we'll take some time to think about why feeding difficulties occur. The first section we'll think about today is physical difficulties. Now for adults, eating might seem quite simple. We do it automatically without really thinking about what we're doing. But for children, this can be much more complex. Now they might be having difficulties with using their jaw, their tongue, their lips to eat. And this could be due to the motor patterns not yet being learned, as they haven't been exposed to foods that need these skills. Think about the child who will only accept fluids like milk or formula, or only very smooth purees. They haven't had the chance yet to learn how to chew because they might not be accepting pieces of food yet. Parents often think this is because they cannot chew, but it's most likely that they're not accepting pieces of food because of sensory aversion or their own preference or a fear of new food. It can also be due to anatomical differences or muscular weakness. Then a whole other area is difficulties with swallowing or dysphagia. This is where the child, when they're eating or drinking, the food will go into the airways instead of down the esophagus into the stomach. A clue that this is happening is your child will often cough straight after drinking. And it's not only gagging on lumps, it can cause chest infections if not appropriately managed. Really important to flag this to us if you're concerned about possible dysphagia, as there is a team who specializes in this area who could assess your child. Another area to consider is constipation. If you're constipated, you won't really feel like eating because it affects your appetite. And of course, if you're not really eating the kinds of foods that help with bowel movements, then you might get constipated more easily. So really important to speak to your GP about this.
Hello, my name is Millie and I am the psychologist within the MDT feeding team. We know that feeding and eating difficulties can create significant stress for children and young people and their parents or carers, and my role within the feeding team is to support children, young people and their families in this area. That may be exploring ways that may be keeping the feeding and eating difficulties going, and also considering ways to perhaps break these cycles. Neophobia is an area that can bring understanding to feeding and eating difficulties, and most simply is described as a fear of anything new and is a very normal developmental phase. All children, they go through a process by which they get used to people, toys and food, and become fearful of things that are then considered new and different. Now, this can be applied to feeding and eating, where new foods are then rejected. So parents may notice difficulties accepting perhaps a range of food at the introduction of different textures. So, for example, when more lumpier textures are introduced. And any food then that is not the same as the accepted food, so as a new food, can trigger this fear response in the child. Now, children who are experiencing fear, and also children who may be more sensory hypersensitive, are more likely to attend to very small details than look at the sort of wider and bigger picture. So, for example, 2 halves of a digestive biscuit are not seen the same as a whole digestive biscuit, because children, they're focusing on these exact details of the food rather than those general factors in terms of what they might have in common. Children who are perhaps more anxious in their temperament, or as I mentioned, have sensory hypersensitivities, are more likely to have a stronger neophobic response. Now, many children grow out of this response by around 5 years old, and this progression is seen in children who may want to imitate other people, and those who can see the similarities between foods with the same labels. So, for example, this is a biscuit, this is different, and this is still a biscuit, this is different again, and this is still a biscuit. And this process occurs through exposure. Now, this process is much more likely to take longer for children with special educational needs or neurodiversity. And for some young people, they don't grow out of this stage, and the fear of new or different food, it continues. Now, in terms of further building understanding and building on from this neophobic and fear response, we can also think about a child or young person's previous experiences and how this may impact a young person's eating behaviour. Now, there are lots of different previous experiences that could be included, but a couple of examples would be, for example, a young person who has had an early experience of reflux, and therefore eating may have been associated with some discomfort and perhaps some pain, and therefore for these children eating may be associated as an unpleasant experience. Similarly, in another example, children who have had experiences of perhaps choking on a certain food have experienced distress through the experience of choking, and therefore may be reluctant, understandably, to eat the same food or similar foods again. So in these cases, children may have associated eating with an unpleasant consequence. Now, vicious cycles can explain how anxiety can increase for children, young people and their families around food, and how this may impact food acceptance or rejection. Now, often we may hear that a way to get your child to perhaps eat a new food is by hiding this food inside one of their safe and accepted foods. Now, this is rarely a successful strategy. As we've acknowledged, children who are fearful or anxious or have sensory sensitivities, they will be very hypervigilant and very aware of the differences in the food if something's added to it. And they will then perceive that the food is different, and the fear of difference means that it will be rejected. The experience of this fear response and anxiety in the child reduces their appetite and increases their hypersensitivity to changes even further. And often what may happen is young people then may not accept the initial safe food again, which understandably causes an increase in parental anxiety as one less safe food is then accepted. A food jag occurs when young people eat a limited range, a limited number of foods, and then therefore they may eat the same food over and over again. So, for example, the same thing for breakfast every day. Now, over time, they then may become bored of this and refuse it. And this causes an increase in parental anxiety, understandably, as there may not be a large range of other, let's say, breakfast items for that to be replaced with. A final area just to note here is thinking about implicit messages. And one that we often see is where we may say to children, if you eat this, then you can have that. So, for example, eat up your vegetables and then you can have some pudding. Now, what this actually communicates to the child implicitly is that vegetables are not nice and need to be counteracted with something that is nice, rather than all foods being on a similar level. Now, as we have acknowledged on the previous slides, supporting children and young people with avoidant and restrictive eating can be really, really stressful for parents, and then meal times themselves can become really stressful and pressurized and difficult. Now, this is entirely understandable, and parents, they may have worries such as, but what if my child starves, and what if they aren't getting all the nutrients that they need? And sometimes what can happen is these high levels of stress can lead parents to do almost anything to support their child to eat, such as perhaps trying to force their child to eat or bargain with their child to eat. But as detailed on the previous slides, this then means that the eating experience for the child is associated with discomfort, and they are even less likely to eat. Another area we see that can increase stress is when parents and wider family members may disagree or have different views on the ways to feed their child.
Let's think about individual patterns. Now, your child, and you of course, have their own unique temperament, safe foods, and ways of coping. I mean, think for yourself. You might also have sensory aversion to certain foods or textures or the way it looks. And same with your child. It's important for us to put ourselves in their shoes and imagine how they must be experiencing food and meal times. You can acknowledge their patterns and try to gently build their tolerance, and that really is the best way to create change. Now think about small steps. We don't want to change too many things too quickly, otherwise it becomes overwhelming for them and for us as the parents or carers. And some children will find it scary, frustrating, confusing, or worrying when non-preferred food items are given to them, even if they once accepted them. The next section we'll think about today is social communication difficulties. Now, some of the children represented today might be on the pathway to be assessed for autism. They might have already been diagnosed with autism, or some of the children represented here today won't have any kind of diagnosis. They are just aversive eaters for other reasons. But let's think about those children with social communication difficulties. Now, they often present with rigid thinking. So here we have a few pictures of apples. Now, they might, for instance, decide that they will only accept an apple of a certain color. Of course, remember, the texture and taste inside is affected by the type of apple it is. A red apple can be much sweeter than a green apple. They might want it to be presented cut up in a certain way, might not accept food with any blemishes or, for instance, broken biscuits or broken breadsticks because it looks different to them, it looks wrong. We had one boy who would take one bite out of an apple, push it to the side, take another apple, take a bite out of that one, and repeat the process over and over. Because to him, that apple just didn't look right again after a bite was taken out of it, and therefore he had to start on a new apple. Of course, they might have difficulties with socialization and reduced modeling, so they might not watch other people eat and feel motivated to try the food as well. They could have limited interests. Say, for instance, they have their special toys that they always play with it and in a very specific way, and they're just not interested in these other toys. Now, the same with food. They have their food and they just don't have the interest to try anything else. Think about sensory needs as well. Now, this is a huge thing, so we'll talk about this in some further slides. And it's good to mention that feeding difficulties or food aversion is very common in children with autism. Next, we're going to think of a very important aspect that has a big impact on mealtimes, our sensory responses. Now, of course, we know of the normal sensory aspects that we consider in daily life, so what we're seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. Then we also have movement in space. That's to do with your inner ear and the way it registers movement. Next one, body position. This is the way that the muscles send messages back to the brain about the position your body is in, how you're moving it, and how much force you're using. And interoception, that is the sense of those internal messages and how well you're recognizing it. So, for instance, you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're cold, hot, in pain, sleepy, your emotions and why you're feeling these emotions. Now, sensory processing is the process in which the central nervous system registers and processes these various types of sensory input. Now, for some people, these messages are not quite transmitted as they should be. For some, the transmission is stronger than it should be, and these people are oversensitive to the input. Sensory undersensitivity is where the messages just aren't strong enough, and sensory seeking is the type of person who always wants more. Okay, so let's think of each of these categories in more detail. Now, just a reminder, as I just said, for the people who are oversensitive, the messages are being transmitted too strongly and you are feeling like it is too much or overwhelming. And what you see is that these people will usually actively avoid non-preferred sensory input. So they might seem to be fearful and cautious or negative and defiant. So you're basically getting that flight or fight response because the sensory input is overwhelming. So some examples to do with food. They might only like bland tastes because they're so sensitive to the taste of food. So they will prefer to avoid stronger flavors. They might overreact to smells. For instance, you might be cooking chicken or, of course, something like fish in the kitchen, and they might find it really tricky to deal with that. Or they hate sitting at the table with you and smelling other people's food. They might dislike touching messy textures. That can be quite tricky, of course, when they have to feed themselves, and that's where they might finger splay. That's basically where they lifting all the other fingers out of the way and they're trying to touch the food with the smallest amount of finger space. or lip splay is basically like this. You pull your lips apart and you avoid touching the food with your lips as you're eating it. The next section we'll look at is for those who are undersensitive to sensory input. Now, these people might seem withdrawn or be difficult to arouse because they might not register the information. Think, for instance, of a child who's being spoken to and just don't register that auditory information. Now, of course, this can happen to kids who are distracted, but this would be more than what you would expect. Often you also see these people seeking the sensory information required for the brain to feel just right and achieve that sort of calm, alert state. So some examples with eating is children or people might eat non-food items. Now this is called pica. Some just chew it, spit it out, others actually swallow it, which of course can be dangerous. The reason they might be doing this is if you've got something hard or chewy that you are biting down on, you're getting a lot of deep pressure through your jaw, which increases that body awareness. It might also be that they're chewing on something like sand or stones, which gives you a lot of tactile stimulation in your mouth, lots of touch. And those kinds of things would create this vibration within in your inner ear. So those people looking for movement in space will feel that kind of input is very satisfying. Of course, some of the children might find it very difficult sitting still, as they will always be looking for movement stimulation. So it might be that they're rocking, spinning, running around more than usual. We have a chance now to look through some of the sensory processing differences that people might experience. And this is a good opportunity for you to think about the signs that you always see with your child and what it might mean. On handout number 2, which is the handout talking about sensory processing impacting meal times, on page 2, you will find this table. So please have a look now, find this handout, which should have been emailed to you. On the one side, you'll see the oversensitive column and then the undersensitive column. Read through these and tick the ones that you think applies to your child. This will hopefully be handy for you in the future. So for instance, if you see your child doing the finger splay, it will help you understand, well, it's because they're sensitive to touch and they're trying to avoid touching the food. So they're using the smallest amount of finger space that they can. You might also realize for yourself that some of these things you notice in yourself. It's really important for us as adults to also be aware of our own sensory needs and how that actually works with the child's sensory needs. It might be similar, might actually be different. If we want to be successful as parents, helping our children feel calm and focused at mealtimes, we also need to make sure that we are well regulated. So we need to consider how we can help ourselves feel less averse, for instance, to touching food that we might not like. So important to consider. I'll give you a moment to do that. When you've done it, click onto the next slide. Okay, another activity. If you find handout number 3, you'll see it's a goal sheet. Now, it's important to actually make sure you use the information that's being shared today. As I said at the start, if you don't make any changes, nothing will change. So your goal sheet is basically your plan. How will you go forward in the next few months? So important to think of the areas of eating and mealtimes that you would like to see a change in. And remember, it's best to choose the most important priorities for yourself at the moment or for your child, and think of making small changes. If it's too much at a time, your child will find it hard, you will find it hard, and you won't stick to it. So think of 3 goals that you'd like to work on in the next 3 months. I mean, it could be less. So some examples could be eating 1 new protein in 3 months, or eating 1 new fruit and 1 new vegetable in 3 months. Number 2, for my child to sit for at least 10 minutes at meal times, or for my child to feed themselves at least 5 spoonfuls at meal times. And as we talk through the strategies in the next few slides, it's important then to stop, make a note of the ideas you're going to use next to the different goals. Okay, the next section we really focus on strategies of how to help your child. If you haven't had a break yet, I would suggest taking some time out, getting some movement, having a drink, just to get your mind ready to focus on the next bit.
Now, if we have a look at things that we know work really well and things that don't work so well. So as Elsa has already mentioned, hiding or disguising new foods within safe foods can actually have a very negative effect. So this is something that we want to avoid. We also want to avoid force feeding, as this can cause a lot of stress and pressure around meal times. We also want to avoid using preferred foods as rewards, as Elsa mentioned, and I'm sure along your journey somewhere someone would have said to you, oh, just don't give them their favorite foods, or leave a really long gap between meal times, or starve them and they will eat. And we actually know that children who are restrictive eaters would rather go the whole day without eating anything if that meant that they had to eat their non-preferred foods. So we really want to avoid this. And then over-encouragement can sometimes also have an opposite effect. So what we do want to focus on is giving permission for your child to have their preferred food to maintain their weight and also reduce the amount of stress at meal times. We also want to create regular family meal times and routines. We want to avoid standard healthy eating advice, and I'll touch on this in a few slides, and then think about the responsibility at meal times. And Elsa will speak to this in a few moments. Our golden rules. So these are extremely important strategies for you to focus on and try to see if we can implement. So number 1 golden rule is that at meal times, we always want to offer something you know that they'll eat. So every meal, every snack time, you offer at least 1 portion of their safe food. Then what we want to do is we want to offer something less familiar to them, ideally that the rest of the family is eating, because it just saves you having to cook one extra thing. Or if there's something that you're particularly focusing on, you can then, of course, offer that. Ideally, it would be nice to have it on their plate, but if need be, it can be on a separate plate or a learning plate. And this learning plate, for example, a side plate, can then move further away if needed and then be brought closer. So it can help with exposure at meal times. And then we want to support them increase their exposure by working through the steps to eating. So you can see on the screen this step ladder with some pictures. So this is handout number 3 in the packs that you have received. And the steps to eating is extremely helpful when we want to support children learning about and exploring new foods. So for us as adults who may not have any feeding difficulties, we think feeding is really easy. It's 2 steps. You see the food and you eat it. But actually, this is a summarized version. We know that there's actually 32 steps from just feeling comfortable to be in the same room as a particular food all the way up to eating. So it's really important to know that this can take a lot of time, a lot of practice, but it can be extremely beneficial. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate how to use the steps to eating with younger children, so using a more fun, play-based approach, and then we'll think about how to use this for older children, where we're thinking a little bit more about engaging their brains and thinking about the properties of food. So I have a cherry tomato, and I'm going to show you how I would start on the steps to eating. And it's really important to remember that we don't want to do any of these things to your child. We want to do it with them. So they have a cherry tomato, I have my cherry tomato, and you're going to be modeling to do. So if your child, you put it on your plate and they just look at it, you're going to look at yours and show them, oh, this is a round ball. And maybe if it's on a plate, you can show them how if I move the plate, the cherry tomato rocks from side to side. Then you can show them how to take the next step. So you say, oh, look, I'm poking it with my fork. And now I can use this to drum on the table. Bang, bang, bang. Or I can use my fork to fly around and fly all the way around my head, for example. If they're happy to copy you, then you show them, oh, and I'm going to poke it with my finger. Poke, poke, poke. Or let's see if we can rock it on my fork. Then we move to the next step. If they're happy to copy you, you can show them, oh, I'm going to hold it in my hand, and I wonder if my cherry tomato can drive all the way up my arm. And perhaps they really like red buses, and you can sing the wheels on the bus as we drive up our arm. Or you might do hop little bunny, so it's hop little bunny, hop, 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 and we're hopping all the way up our shoulder and onto our head, and we are hopping, hopping, hopping on our head. Then we might come down to our nose because we want them to start smelling it. So again, we could do some hopping, or we could beep on our nose, beep, 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 or it can be a car that drives down and ramps off our nose. Again, you showing them and encouraging them to copy you. Then we want to move to our lips. So we could think, oh, could we give it a kiss? Or could we do some beeping, beep, beep, beep? Or could we roll it along our lips? Just giving them some fun things and thinking, what is something that's really going to engage and interest your child based on what they like to do. If they're happy to do that, you say, oh, look, I'm going to touch it on my teeth. Beep, 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 or bang, 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 or see, no hands, I'm holding it in my teeth. Then we can move on to licking, so giving it a little lick, thinking, oh, that's sweet or spicy. And then we can think, okay, number 9 is blow a rocket. So this is an American term. Basically means having the food in their mouth and spitting it out. That is okay. Just because the food's gone in, we don't have to have that pressure to eat it. And then obviously number 10 is eating. So that's a really quick example to move up the steps. It might happen that with something that's easy, you might be able to move quite high up the steps, but it may also be that something you're doing a food that's a little bit more tricky, you may only get to step number 3. And that's completely fine, because the idea is when we practice again with that food, we want to see, can we move then to step number 4? So, for example, if you were on step number 3, you were touching it with your finger and they were happy to touch it, but then you started bouncing in your hand and up your arm, and your child just didn't want to copy you, you can try give them 2 or 3 examples of some different fun things to do. But if they're just not interested, then what you do is you go back to the previous step and you emphasize what they were doing well. So you go back to, oh, well, let's touch it again. Good touching or good poking. So we're ending on a positive note. And then you just keep in your mind or in a little notebook, okay, tomato, today we got to step number 3. And then it's a nice way to see your progress as you move through the steps. So that's for the younger children. For the older children, we can use the exact same principles, but we just adjust it slightly. So instead of doing hopping and beeping and poking, we can think about, okay, what does the food look like? What color is it? What shape is it? Is it small? Is it big? Then we can touch it and see what does it feel like. And we might touch the outside, compare it to the inside, and think, is it hard or soft or wet or dry or bumpy or smooth? Is it hot or cold? So we're thinking about these lovely properties. And then we can bring it to our nose, give it a sniff. Is it a small smell, a medium smell, a big smell, or is it salty or spicy or bready, planty? And then we can touch it on our lips. And you can use the steps where we think about, okay, touching it to our lips, then licking it and getting a little taste, then getting a little taste on our tongue, and then tasting it in our mouths. And again, using those lovely properties. What does it taste like? Salty, sweet, spicy, sour. And you will receive in the packs some nice pictures to be able to use to support this for the older children. It's really, really important to remember that it can take up to 30 times of trying food before your child may feel comfortable to eat it. So with that, it's really just emphasizing we want to keep practicing, keep going. And each child will progress at a different rate. And some may take months, some may take years. You might see with tomato-flavored breadsticks, we go really fast up the steps, whereas something like a fresh tomato, we might take a little bit longer. So it is really helpful to keep going, keep practicing, and really celebrate each little win and each little step that you're moving up the steps. It is important for us to think about how we're going to rotate these new foods, because we don't want to give the same food every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because then your child will just think, no thank you, this is too much. So the aim is to follow a 3-day rotation. So for example, if we explored tomatoes today, the next time we would do it would be on day 4. We also want to try and have one new food at each meal and each snack time. This is the absolute ideal. We know that life is busy and things happen, so this might not always be what happens, but ideally this is what we're aiming for. And it doesn't need to be a big portion. It literally can be 1 cherry tomato, 1 chicken nugget, for example. Just a small portion so that there's not a lot of wastage. And ideally, something that you've already cooked that the rest of the family are having. Now, having a look at our silver rules. So one of our silver rules is to focus on a lovely mealtime routine, thinking about offering 3 meals and 2 snacks, 3 snacks if needed, to help support good hunger regulation and levels throughout the day and avoid grazing, because we know if children are grazing or snacking all throughout the day, by the time it comes to a mealtime, their motivation to eat and explore new foods is not very high. We then need to consider the priorities. So getting in enough food overrides the right food for the time of day. Or, for example, you might offer easier food when your child is tired. There's no set rule to say that we have to have breakfast cereals for breakfast. We could have leftovers from the night before, and that's perfectly fine. We want to focus on keeping meal times under 30 minutes. So 30 minutes is the length of time that we know children are able to easily sit and eat and concentrate for. Anything past this becomes really difficult and often ends in frustration, tears, arguments, and just not a very positive experience. So this is something we want to try and focus on. And then we need to ensure that the environment is aligned with their sensory needs. Elta will talk more on this in the upcoming slides. It is also very important to think about portion sizes. It's a common thing where we think, okay, well, my child has been at nursery or school for the whole day, and I just know that they haven't eaten very well. So when they come home, I'm going to offer them this big plate of food because they must be hungry. But actually, for your child, what that could be doing is just overwhelming them too much, creating more stress and decreasing their appetite. So what we want to aim for is age-appropriate portion sizes at each mealtime, and they have the option to have seconds of the food that you have offered. So this is a lovely picture representation of that. Something else that can also be really helpful is thinking about tablespoons of food per year of age. For example, if my child is 2 years old, I would be giving them 2 tablespoons of rice, 2 tablespoons of salmon, 2 tablespoons of vegetables. If they were 6, that would go up to 6. Obviously, this is just a rough guideline. If your child is really active or they can eat more than that, that's perfectly fine. But we're just thinking about the minimum requirements to ensure they are meeting their energy levels and needs. We have now had a look at what happens at mealtimes, but something that can be extremely helpful is thinking about exposure activities away from mealtimes. Because at mealtimes, the expectation is that we need to eat our food, whereas when we're away from the table, there's slightly less pressure and we can sometimes see greater improvements. So thinking about some activities, could be food shopping together. If they are older, you could take them down, for example, the vegetable aisle and say, please may you get me the cucumber and place it in the trolley. So by doing that, they're already using their hands to touch it. Things like cooking or baking, making smoothies, pizza faces, can all be really fun because without knowing it, they're engaging with the food. They're looking at it, they're touching it, and you could even encourage them to perhaps give it a smell before they put it into the bowl, for example. Then thinking about food play. So this is more for your younger children, below 5 years old, where things are just very messy, very fun. And the West Hill Enchant Children's Centre at near Southside Shopping Mall have messy play sessions. So if your child is under 5 and you think this is something that they would really enjoy, you can just Google West Hill Enhanced Children's Centre and you can get in contact with them to find out their availability and their timetable for when the messy play sessions are running. For the older children, you can think about them becoming a food scientist. So doing some experiments at food. What happens when we mix 2 different juices? Or what happens to the properties of the pasta when it's dry versus when it's cooked? Or what happens to a grape when we freeze it? And just being very inquisitive, having lots of fun, trying to explore these different foods. Again, with absolutely no pressure to eat or drink. So thinking about food chaining, we often get asked the question where parents say, okay, this all sounds great, but I just don't know what foods to start introducing to my child. And food chaining can be really helpful. So we want to focus on introducing foods that are very similar to the foods already accepted. Because we know feeding is difficult. You know, we don't want to go from eating crunchy beige foods to now saying, okay, well, here's a bowl of spaghetti bolognese. Try this. That's just going to be far too overwhelming. So we can think about what is similar. So, for example, they like chicken nuggets. You can try explore turkey dinosaurs. They like fries. You can try some different options. I'll explain the picture shortly. Perhaps if they like bread, you could try toast or brioche buns, hamburger rolls, something different. And if they like strawberry yogurt, you could try raspberry yogurt. And it is really important to be clear that this food is similar to the one that they like and accept. We don't want to trick them. We don't want to get some skinny fries that we make at home and put it in a McDonald's container and say, oh, it's McDonald's fries. We want to be very transparent. This is similar, but it's a little bit different. Let's explore it. So you can see some of the pictures at the bottom. Using the McDonald's example, we might try practice making skinny fries at home. And what we would do is we say, oh, these are like McDonald's, but let's look at them. What do they look like? Or let's touch them. Or if it's a little one, then we might hop the fries on our arm and hop them on our head and beat them on our nose. So moving up the steps to eating, hopefully these are accepted over time. And then you can start thinking about, okay, well, let's try fatter fries. How do we get on with fatter fries? And we use the steps to eating until those are accepted, and then we can try wedges, for example. So this is just a very easy example. You can chain with many things. So if your child likes chocolate muffins, you could say, okay, I'm going to work on exploring a blueberry muffin. So we work on exploring that. Eventually we get to the top of the steps to eating. And then we think, okay, well, there were blueberries in the muffin. Let's make that link in my child's mind and let's explore some blueberries together. So you might start off by making some blueberry muffins together and then explore the individual blueberries. So then we've gone from a chocolate muffin to eating a fruit, to eating blueberries, which is really good. You'll see in the handouts number 4 and 5 that we've given you, there's two, one food selection by color and one food selection by texture. So if we know that, okay, my child really likes beige type of foods and they don't eat a lot of vegetables, you'll have a look on the left-hand side to think, okay, we're choosing the beige category, and then at the top you have the different food groups. So we'll move across to vegetables, and then if you look down, you match those two up, you will see different options of beige vegetables, like parsnip, where you could do parsnip chips, or cauliflower, you could do cauliflower bites, for example. So that's just to help give you some ideas. Something that is important to think about, and this may not be relevant for everyone in today's workshop, but certainly for some it can be very helpful, and that is oromotor practice. Thinking about using bite and dissolve foods like baby wafers or Kiddylicious puffs, the carrot puffs, with a specific focus on chewing on our gum ridges, if there's no teeth, or our big back molar teeth. And this is something that we can do to really encourage chewing and development of the muscles. So what we want to do is be models, show your child how it's done. And think about doing this in very over-exaggerated movements. So you want to talk about what you're doing and show them. And ideally, it's nice to use stick-shaped foods. So not smaller than the size of my finger or a fat Cokie pen. And we want to think about showing them how we're putting it on our big back teeth. So we might talk about opening our mouth wide and placing it right at the back on our big teeth and doing crunching. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And you show them how you're opening your mouth and where you are chewing. For some children, they might need a little bit of support. So you can do something what we call hand under hand, where you gently guide their hand with the food into your mouth. Again, we don't want to be forcing it. So we really want them to be able to feel comfortable to open their mouth by themselves voluntarily, and then you just help guide where the food should be placed in their mouth. And we want to repeat this every single day. The more practice, the better in developing those muscles.
Another important aspect to consider is suitable seating at mealtimes. We want to make sure that the child is posturally stable. This will hopefully help them to sit for a bit longer and do better self-feeding when using their hands. So how do you achieve this? Really important to get the feet on a flat, stable base. Here we have a picture of a height-adjustable high chair from Stocky called the Trip Trap. This is a wonderful chair. You get other brands as well, and they have grooves on the side, and you're able to adjust the height of the seat and the footrest as they grow. And Stocky advertised theirs being suitable from baby to adulthood, so the seat can be used all through the development. We had one lady who bought her 7-year-old son one of these seats, and she was so happy with the difference it made with his seating at mealtimes. He was happy to stay at the table for longer. You can use something else as well, but it is important to make sure that the tray or table surface should fall between the child's belly button and breast level. So if you do have a normal dining chair, use something like a booster seat strapped to the seat with a solid footrest to help their feet be at that flat, stable level, and the knees need to be over the edge of the seat. So let's think of other things that might also help at meal times. We need to consider the sensory needs of the child. We need to consider the sensory needs of the adult and how that impacts your stress levels at meal times. And the child will show you what they need through their actions or behavior. So prepare the environment, the child, and the adult for the meal. So we'll talk about that in more detail. Let's think about the sensory preparation of the child for meal times. Now, this can actually be really, really effective, and I would highly recommend having a sensory routine before meal times. It's something that you and the child can get used to, and it will just be part of everyday life. First of all, we always start with alerting activities, followed by heavy muscle work, followed by calming activities. So there's lots of ideas online, and I've included a few here. So for younger children, you want to get some alerting activities, so it's basically movement. So you can have them on your lap, you can sing some songs, do some actions, and there could be lots of lifting of the child, or swinging is great. So they can swing in your arms. You can have them in something like a blanket and two of you swing them together. You can bounce them on your knees, or you can use a peanut ball. So a peanut ball is an inflatable exercise ball. You get different sizes, so make sure you get the right kind of size for your young child. And you can have them on there, hold their hips, and bounce them up and down. Some ideas for older children, jumping. So it can be jumping on a trampoline. You get these lovely little exercise trampolines that you can have indoors if you don't have a garden. Could be jumping jacks or star jumps, or jumping from a step down and repeating that a few times, or jumping on the spot, jumping forward, singing a song like Hop Little Bunny, hop, 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 and then jumping in the song. Some bouncing perhaps. That could be them sitting on a peanut ball as well, a bigger one, of course, if they're older, or a round therapy ball is fine as well. Running, they can run, they can crash into a sofa or big pillows or something like a beanbag. Following all the movement, you can now get them to do some heavy muscle work. So for the younger kids, this can be crawling. So you can say, let's crawl through a pop-up tunnel, or crawl under the table, or under or around the chair. So you can just think about making this fun. And perhaps if they can't quite understand what it is you're trying to get them to do, you show them and see if they would copy. Or you have something else to engage them. If they, for instance, love dinosaurs or trains, you get the dinosaur or the train to do the action, and then hopefully they will copy. Or you can have the toy halfway through, and then they crawl through, and then perhaps get them to the other side. Animal walks could be really fun. So there we have a few pictures. We have the crab walk for the picture with the green. Donkey kick. Now that can be quite tricky, so perhaps that's more for the older kids. Bear walk. Hopefully the younger kids can do this. For the older children, it could be wall pushes or wall push-ups. So wall pushes, you actually pretend to push the wall away using all your might. Wall push-ups is just push-ups against a wall. I mean, it can be push-ups on the floor as well, of course. Climbing. So if they have an opportunity to go to a playground, or if you have any kind of climbing equipment at home. Wheelbarrow walking. So there's a picture of a lady on a therapy ball, straight arms, and you walk forward on your arms, on your hands and back, and repeat that a few times, and you can guide the child to do this. So these are just a few ideas. Following the alerting and heavy muscle work activities, you always need to do something calming so they can feel like they are grounded, relaxed when they have to come to meal times. So Ideas for any age could be big hugs. You can give the younger ones a big hug, or the older ones can squeeze their arms like this and squeeze their bodies for, say, 10 counts. Could be rolling a therapy ball over their body. So there we have a picture of it being done. The child can lie down on the carpet or a mat or a bed, and you roll a therapy ball from their shoulders all the way down their body to their ankle with some pressure applied to the ball. So it's like having a giant massage, and it feels amazing. Some other ideas is wrapping them tightly in a blanket, some deep breathing. If they don't yet know how to do deep breathing, you can say, smell the flower and blow out the candle. Smell the flower, blow out the candle. So hopefully following this, they feel a bit calmer, more ready to engage and sit for longer. We also have to consider, of course, as I said earlier, the sensory preparation of the adult. So think about ways to help you as the adult feel calmer and more ready for mealtimes as well. You can do the sensory routine with the children. That's absolutely fine. We want to prepare the environment as well, of course. So think of your child-specific sensory needs and how you can minimize distractions, perhaps with changes in light or sound. Think of the child who hates seeing other people's food and get very distracted with the environment. Some dimmer lights for them might be good. Where, on the other hand, a child that's quite passive and difficult to arouse might need brighter lighting. The child who hates hearing other people or themselves chew could benefit from some nice background music just to drown out that sound. And it could also help with attention. Let's think of some equipment that could be used at mealtimes. So there we have a picture of the Move and Sit cushion. Cushion filled with air, has some bubbles on it, and the wedge shape helps lift and tilt that pelvis to get a better sitting position. Now this is really great for those kids who struggle to sit still, needs lots of movement, because they can move on this while they're at the table. A wobble cushion is also great. It's the round flat ones. Now this won't work well for kids who don't have a lot of postural stability and have lower muscle tone, who seem a bit hunched or floppy. They'll find it harder to stay sitting and won't like it. Then the TheraBand, there's a picture of the chair with a yellow band around the legs. This is a stretchy exercise band, and it's great for those kids who need lots of movement again, love to move their legs. They can kick against it, have their feet on it, and it sometimes helps them to sit for longer. Another thing that works really well is a weighted lap pad or shoulder pad. So there we have a picture with the child having the weighted blue lap pad on the lap. This just gives some deep pressure, which is really calming and can help the child feel calmer and hopefully more focused at mealtimes. Fidget toys can be helpful. Some of the kids just want to fidget with something, and this could be a great solution at mealtimes as well. Let's think about some more ideas that can help. It can be quite hard for children to leave the activity they're enjoying and come and do something the adults are saying they need to do. So for instance, mealtimes. Something that can help is visual cards. You might have come across these through speech and language therapy or at the nursery, for instance. If a child can't yet understand how to use a visual card, you could use an object of reference. That's something like, say, a spoon. And by giving the child a spoon, they realize it is time for meal and they have to go and sit at the table. If they can understand, say, just one visual card, you can show them a visual of sitting at the table or having their meal. If they can move on to two, you can have a now and next board. So you'll see there we have a picture of that in the middle. The now needs to be the thing that they need to do. So for instance, coming to sit at the table, having their meal, and the next needs to be something motivating. So that could be something like playing with their toys, reading a book, watching TV. If they can follow more visual cards, you can have a whole visual schedule or timetable with different cards on a strip. You can buy these ready-made, you can make them yourself, you can stick them on using sticky Velcro dots that you can buy from Amazon. You can use blue tack, anything really that's handy. We have included in handout number 8 and 9 some visual cards for you and a now and next board, so you can also print these off, cut it out, and use it at home. Another thing that really helps is having a visual timer. That can help the children understand how long do I still need to be doing this task for. You can use it in different ways, for instance, saying 5 minutes until mealtime or 5 minutes until you need to wash your hands. You can sit for 5 minutes or just a bit longer than they're able to really tolerate, so slightly longer. Then you can have a quick movement break, come back, sit again for the time period that is shown. You can get different timers. I love the timer app. That's the red one on the phone. You can buy an actual timer as well if you don't want to use an electronic device. You can get different fan timers. So you can decide, for instance, okay, 5 minutes sitting, 1 minute movement break. Or you can get some fancy light-up ones. Let's think about some more things that could work. Rewards. So that could be reward charts or pasta jar, marble jar, stickers. You just have to decide what your child will find motivating, what they'll understand, and what it is you really want to reward. So is it that you're rewarding them for being at the table? Is it that you're saying, well, if you use your cutlery even for a little bit, say, for instance, to do 5 scoops and mum or dad does the rest, it could be a sticker. It could be that you're saying, okay, if we explore these foods, you can get a sticker. So you just have to decide. But we just don't use foods as a reward. Otherwise, it gives the child this understanding that that food you're using as a reward must be amazing, and we're trying to avoid that. Thinking about the cups, the plates, the placemats can also be helpful. A placemat, for instance, can just show this is my area and here I have my food and I don't have to worry about your food on your placemat. Cups, plates, some children find visual stimulation overwhelming and actually even struggle registering visual information if there's lots of things or objects to look at. So for them, it's important to use plain cups, plates, etc. For kids who might find pictures quite motivating, you could have something like a lovely Peppa Pig decorated bowl or, Thomas cutlery, whatever they're interested in. Here we have some pictures of options. So there's a plate with different sections, and you can, for instance, use this when you're exploring different foods. Or there we in the middle have a picture of a divider plate. So keeping the food separate so it doesn't touch. You get plain ones, of course. This one actually shows the different food groups, so children can learn about how much of my food should actually be from each food group. You also get plates that have a base where you can pour boiling water in and it keeps the food warm for longer. Thinking about cutlery, so a lot of children can struggle using normal cutlery. A good solution is something like caring cutlery, which you'll see there on the picture. You can buy this online and these fit really well into their little hands. This is the junior caring cutlery. It has spaces then to put their fingers, so they can know the best way to hold it, and it is much easier to use. Let's think about some more things that can help. So, of course, we want mealtimes to be relaxed and as stress-free as possible. And I know that's much easier said than done. Here are some ideas to manage different moods, so our own moods as the adults and those of our kids. So think about something to help you or them relax. So it could be deep breathing exercise or body stretches. There's lots of lovely YouTube videos as well that you can use to follow along when you're doing some of these. Set boundaries. Do let your child know what is acceptable behavior. It's really important that they understand this, and children thrive when they have boundaries in place because they also know what is expected. Reward their efforts and create a space for your child to calm down if needed. Making time to talk or wind down. If your child is able, give them some time to share their fears or worries away from the dinner table, or wind down with a fun or calming activity. As your child gets older, it could be really helpful engaging their thinking processes. This can be quite powerful to override your sensory aversion. Now think about yourself. You might not enjoy a certain food, but you still eat it because you know it's good for you. So similar with children, we're trying to help them to understand why we need to eat. So for instance, the rationale for eating a different variety of foods. What are the micronutrients? What do each do? What happens if I don't eat it? Think about some other ways that you can make it fun and engaging. So for instance, if they love Peppa Pig, there was a boy who watched a video of Peppa Pig eating strawberries, and he asked for strawberries and ate it. Or your child might love superheroes, and you say, well, if you want to be strong like Hulk, you need to eat protein because protein helps build muscles. Or if you want to be like Spider-Man really fast, you need to have your carbohydrates because it gives you energy. Social stories can also be helpful. This is where they read stories about having meals and the expectations of meal times. There's lots of lovely little books out there as well for kids where they can learn about food and the importance of food. And for those kids who are a little bit older, there are books out there, for instance, talking about aversive eating and helping them understand it by reading this book. We are almost done with our training video. As a summary, let's think about our responsibilities and how this is divided. So our jobs as adults is to choose and prepare the food. So choose food that you know your child can eat. So every meal and snack time has to have safe food or preferred food. And you need to also offer food alongside that the child can explore. Think about how you prepare that food. So if they love drier, crunchier food, how can you change the texture of the food to be dry and crunchy? Could it, for instance, be vegetable crisps or dehydrated fruit? Provide regular meals and snacks. So 3 meals, 2 snacks is a good example of this. Avoid food and beverages except water between meals and snack time so the child can learn about their hunger cues and they can feel ready for the next meal. This way, they also hopefully eat more when it does come to meal and snack time. Ensure your child is sitting in a supported position. This will help them to hopefully stay seated for longer, feel less fidgety, feed themselves better. Make mealtimes pleasant. We want children to be relaxed and avoid having that flight or fight response. Facilitate food exploration using the steps to eating. Really, really important. So this is one of the key things we work on, the steps to eating, and using this to explore different foods. Be considerate of your child's lack of food experience without catering to likes and dislikes. So put yourself in their shoes, try and understand how they must be feeling and how challenging it can be. So the parents are responsible for what you offer, when you offer it, and how you offer it. And your child is responsible for whether they will eat it and how much of it they will have. You can't force them to eat. You can't control what they're eating and how much they're eating. But you can use the strategies, and hopefully they can be changed over time. At the start of today's session, you had a chance to score your own confidence in managing your child's feeding at mealtimes. Now you have a chance to think about this again and decide whether you feel there's been any change in your confidence about how you'll help them. Could be the same, could be more, could be less. Make a note of the score to hopefully feel encouraged. Earlier today, you also set some goals for eating and mealtimes. Now you'll have a chance to look at those goals again, think whether you still want to keep those and change them a little bit, and then take a few minutes, say 10 minutes, to think about the strategies that you can use to achieve these goals. Have a look back through the slides, remind yourself of all the ideas we spoke about, and add it to your goal sheet. Then, very important, our screening form. You'll see handout number 10 is the screening form. Please complete this and send it back to the email address at the top of the sheet. This will give us the opportunity to decide what to offer you next from our service. If you feel you don't need any further help, please email us and let us know as well. We hope you enjoyed this training experience with us today and that you've learned lots of new ideas and really gained an understanding of feeding difficulties. It would be appreciated if you could fill in this feedback form to give us an idea of your experience today. We look forward to seeing you again in the future.